German doctrine taught that whoever saw first won. On this winter night in 1944, no one saw anything at all, yet one side was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Oberfeldwebel Karl Weiss rests his gloved hand against the cold steel of his Panzer IV, the metal biting through the wool despite the winter air. A cigarette burns low between his fingers, its glow briefly revealing the hard lines of his face before the darkness swallows it again. The ridge near Kleinwald, somewhere east of the Dnieper, lies silent beneath a starless sky. Snow has frozen into iron-hard crusts, crunching faintly under the boots of German tank crews as they move between vehicles. Engines idle at low revolutions, careful not to betray their positions. It is just past midnight, February 1944. They have been told the Red Army is advancing. Weiss exhales smoke slowly and allows himself a thin smile. Let them come at night. The Soviets rely on numbers, on chaos, on brute force. Night belongs to professionals. In darkness, experience matters more than factories. His crew is relaxed, too relaxed, perhaps. Someone mutters a joke about Russian crews freezing in their steel coffins. Another laughs softly. They have held ground like this before. Always the same routine. Wait, listen, watch. The Panzer IV sits hull down behind the ridge, its long 75mm gun trained toward a stretch of frozen fields and broken tree lines. No moon. Visibility perhaps 100 meters at best. Karl's training echoes in his mind. Listen for engines, watch for track sparks, fire on silhouette or muzzle flash. German doctrine. Tested in Poland, tested in France, tested in Russia, again and again. Inside the turret, the gunner, Ernst Vogel, peers through his optical sight, adjusting minutely. Nothing, just shadow and snow, perfect defensive conditions. This is where German crews excel. Disciplined, patient, precise. Radio traffic whispers through the headset. Soviet armor reported crossing a frozen stream to the east. Weiss crushes his cigarette beneath his boot and climbs into the turret, pulling the hatch shut behind him. The interior smells of oil, cordite, and damp wool. Familiar, comforting. The loader, Fritz Meinhardt, slides an armor-piercing round into the breech. Clang, locked, ready. Minutes stretch into long, uncomfortable silence. The engine hums softly beneath them, like a restrained animal. Weiss scans his sector again. Nothing, no sound, no movement. Tank battles are supposed to be noisy. You hear them coming. You feel them. This silence is wrong. Static crackles over the radio. Other crews report the same. No contact, no visuals. Weiss wipes condensation from his brow despite the cold. Something presses at the edge of his awareness. His training has prepared him for ambushes, for sudden charges, for artillery barrages. But not this. This emptiness. He tells himself the Soviets must be just as blind, just as unsure, perhaps more afraid. After all, Soviet optics are crude. Soviet crews rush. Darkness should favor him. Unknown to Karl Weiss, 3 kilometers away, unseen eyes are already fixed on his position. Not human eyes, not optical glass. The hunter has already chosen him. But inside the Panzer IV, Weiss still believes the night is his ally. Still believes experience outweighs innovation. Still waits for a muzzle flash that will never come. At 0:47, the first German tank on Kleinwald Ridge vanishes in a blinding white eruption. No warning, no sound of incoming fire, just an instant of violent light, and a turret thrown into the darkness, burning, spinning, and falling back to earth like a dying star. The radio explodes into chaos. Shouting, half words, panic stripped of grammar. Contact! Where? Fire! Fire! Oberfeldwebel Karl Weiss grips the headset, pressing it harder against his ear as if pressure alone might force meaning out of the noise. Somewhere to the left, no, behind, an explosion blooms, briefly lighting the ridge in violent orange. A panzer vanishes, not disabled, not burning, gone. The concussion slams into Weiss's hull, rattling teeth and optics alike. Snow cascades from the trees like ash. His gunner, Vogel, is already traversing wildly, the hand crank jerking back and forth. "I see nothing," Vogel shouts. "Nothing!" Another detonation, this time closer, far too close. Weiss's pulse hammers. Return fire. That is what doctrine demands. But at what? There are no silhouettes, no muzzle flashes, no engine noise, just darkness, then death. This is wrong. Tank combat is supposed to be brutal, loud, obvious. You see the enemy, or you die trying. You don't simply vanish. A third panzer erupts downhill, its ammunition cooking off in a rapid, stuttering thunder. The ridge is no longer dark now. Burning fuel paints the snow in hellish colors, casting monstrous shadows that twist across armor and trees. The loader, Meinhardt, mutters a prayer through clenched teeth. Weiss snaps at him. "Load! Keep loading!" The breech slams shut. Another armor-piercing round, ready for a target that does not exist. Radio discipline collapses entirely. Crews shout bearings that contradict each other. East, no, north. Impossible ranges. Weiss realizes the truth with a cold certainty that sinks straight through him. They aren't surrounded. They are being picked apart, methodically, calmly. This is not an ambush. This is an execution. "Driver," Weiss orders, voice tight. "Reverse, now!" The world detonates. A tungsten core tears through the panzer's frontal plate as if it were sheet metal. There is no explosion, just physics, velocity, energy. The interior becomes a storm of incandescent fragments. Steel turns liquid. Air becomes knives. Karl Weiss's final thought is not fear, but disbelief. How can they see us? 2 kilometers away, hidden beyond the ridge, Senior Lieutenant Ivan Sokolov lowers his eye from the scope of the new infrared sight mounted awkwardly atop his T-34-85. Through the device, the battlefield glows. German engines burn bright against the frozen land. White shapes crawling slowly, confidently, unaware they are illuminated like flares. Sokolov never sees them with his naked eye. He doesn't need to. The experimental active infrared system, paired with a filtered searchlight invisible to the enemy, turns night into a private daylight. "Target destroyed," he reports calmly. His gunner is already tracking the next luminous shape. 6 seconds from detection to firing solution. The stabilized gun bucks once. Far away, another panzer dies without ever firing. The Germans are shooting into darkness. The Soviets are shooting at heat. By dawn, survivors stumble back toward their lines, faces gray, eyes hollow. Their reports sound insane. Invisible tanks, fire from nowhere, death without warning. Staff officers dismiss them at first, cowardice, fatigue, imagination, until wreckage is examined. Penetration angles are precise, long-range frontal defeats, shots no German manual allows for night combat. A colonel kneels beside a ruined panzer and runs his fingers along the entry hole. His stomach tightens. This was no luck, no accident. The night itself has changed, and the men who did not know that paid for it in steel and blood. Driver's hatch, turret ring, ammunition rack. The damage follows a pattern too precise to dismiss as chance. Colonel Ernst Halder kneels beside the wreck of a Panzer IV, ruler pressed against scorched steel, notebook balanced on his knee. He measures angles, counts degrees, traces trajectories backward through the frozen air. The mathematics are unforgiving. These shots came from positions where visual contact is impossible. No moon, no starlight, no reflected snow glow. Halder checks the figures again, then a third time. They do not change. Senior officers arrive from Army headquarters, skeptical, irritated. They have trained armored units for years. They know German optics intimately. They know what tank crews can and cannot do at night. Night combat is confusion, always has been. At night, tanks blunder into each other or do not fight at all. It is a foundational assumption of armored warfare. The wrecks disagree. Photographs pile up. Identical penetrations, consistent impact points. Frontal kills at distances doctrine says should be suicidal. Survivors are interviewed separately. Their stories align too closely to be dismissed. Invisible fire, no muzzle flashes, no tracers. Death arriving from nowhere. Confidence drains from the room. A technical officer quietly requests all data be forwarded to Berlin, marked highest priority. Someone has encountered something new. Film footage arrives from a damaged Panzer recovered intact. The camera ran until the moment of impact. 14 seconds of darkness, grainy, empty, meaningless, then white light, total destruction. Halder rewinds it. Watches again. The camera sees nothing because there was nothing to see. Intelligence officers scramble for explanations. Some suggest experimental illumination flares. Others whisper about guided munitions, radar-assisted gunnery. All are dismissed. Radar cannot guide a shell like this. Illumination would betray position instantly. Every theory collapses under scrutiny. The enemy is firing accurately in conditions where optical systems are blind, at ranges where human eyesight is irrelevant, with consistency that suggests certainty, not luck. A captured technical pamphlet circulates quietly through command staff, translated poorly, margins filled with pencil notes. One phrase is circled repeatedly: passive infrared observation. Most officers stare at it blankly. Infrared is a wavelength, a scientific curiosity, something for laboratories, not battlefields. How does seeing heat allow you to kill a tank you cannot see? Speculation follows. Thermal contrast, perhaps. Engines radiating warmth against cold ground. But such devices are theoretical, crude, unreliable. The Germans experimented briefly years earlier. The results were disappointing. Too fragile, too complex, too expensive. No one believed it could work, certainly not like this. Halder stands at the window of his field headquarters, looking out at rows of burned-out armor. The casualty lists grow thicker each hour. Entire companies erased. Crews killed without ever firing a shot. And the enemy? No confirmed losses. None attributed to direct fire. Halder has studied armored warfare his entire career, from Cambrai to Kursk, from breakthrough to counterattack. He knows how tank battles unfold. This is not a battle. This is obsolescence. Steel, training, courage. None of it matters if the enemy sees when you cannot. He closes the file slowly. What died on that ridge was not just men or machines. It was an assumption older than the war itself. That night belongs to no one, anymore. Something fundamental has failed. Not armor, not courage, not training. The failure lies deeper, in an assumption so old that no one thought to question it. For centuries, combat was governed by light. If you could not see, you could not fight. Night was protection. Smoke was concealment. Weather was mercy. That rule no longer applies. The American tank does not look, it measures. Every object warmer than the void of space leaks energy. Not light, but radiation, silent, invisible, constant. Heat does not wait to be seen. It announces itself endlessly. The Abrams listens to that announcement. Its thermal system does not care about camouflage patterns or shadows. It does not interpret shape first. It detects difference. 2 degrees, sometimes less. A living body against cold sand, steel cooling slower than earth, an engine block retaining yesterday's warmth. The battlefield becomes a map of betrayals. What once required sunlight now requires only physics. This capability did not appear overnight. It was paid for slowly, methodically, after earlier wars exposed a truth American planners found unacceptable. Soldiers were dying simply because darkness arrived on schedule. Early thermal devices were crude experiments, grainy images, heavy housings, unreliable cooling systems. But iteration is a form of warfare. By the mid-1980s, engineers had transformed theory into routine. The result was not a miracle. It was inevitability. Against it stood a different philosophy. Mass over precision. Simplicity over sensitivity. Systems designed to be cheap, rugged, and replaceable. Optical sights paired with active illumination. Effective but fatal once activated. What made sense on a drafting table in the early 1970s became obsolete without ever firing a shot. Heat cannot be hidden cheaply. A diesel engine is a confession. Recently driven tracks are testimony. A crew inside a steel hull is evidence, and evidence accumulates. The engagement geometry collapses asymmetrically. One side enters the fight minutes before the other realizes a fight exists. What doctrine assumes to be mutual awareness becomes unilateral judgment. There is no exchange of fire, only sequence, detection, classification, confirmation, destruction. By the time the opposing crew hears an explosion, the decision was already made elsewhere, earlier, calmly. Inside the American tank, there is no sense of dominance, no exhilaration. The crew sees what the system shows: white shapes on gray ground, movement vectors, range data. They act accordingly. To them, the battlefield is orderly. To the enemy, it is incomprehensible. The destroyed crews are not outmaneuvered. They are outperceived. Their weapons never fail. Their armor never gets a chance to matter. This is not bravery meeting bravery. It is an older way of war colliding with a newer one, and losing before it understands why. Historians will later argue about numbers, leadership, morale. They always do. But beneath those debates lies a simpler truth. Once war stops depending on light, darkness stops being neutral. And the side that learns this first does not fight battles. It ends them. Military doctrine assumes symmetry. It assumes that when two forces meet, both are playing the same game, using the same senses, constrained by the same limits. Even when technology differs, the underlying logic remains familiar. That assumption dies here. The engagement does not begin with a shot. It begins with detection. A thermal anomaly flickers across the American gunner's display, barely more than a distortion in the background temperature gradient. A few pixels brighter than the sand, insignificant to the human eye, fatal to ignore. The turret rotates, not hurried, not tense, smooth, deliberate. As the image resolves, classification is automatic. Hull geometry, turret curvature, heat distribution pattern. This is not intuition. It is trained recognition accelerated by machines. The rangefinder fires, no sound, no flash, just photons leaving and returning at light speed. Distance, exact. Wind, calculated. Motion vectors, solved. Inside the fire control system, thousands of variables collapse into a single answer. The gunner does not aim in the traditional sense. He confirms. The reticle settles where physics says the target will be, not where it is. The tank itself is in motion, pitching, rolling, vibrating across uneven ground. 60 tons of steel bouncing through desert ruts. Yet the gun remains steady, uncaring. Stabilization systems cancel movement faster than human reflexes can register it. This is not skill replacing machinery. This is machinery redefining skill. When the shot breaks, it is not dramatic. There is no hesitation. No pause for observation. The process is already complete. The outcome decided seconds earlier. The projectile is not explosive. It does not need to be. Speed is sufficient. Mass is sufficient. The energy transfer alone is decisive. On impact, armor ceases to be armor. It becomes fluid. Internal space becomes pressure. Pressure becomes heat. Heat becomes annihilation. On the thermal display, the target flares briefly, then cools. One problem removed. Reloading begins immediately. Movements are rehearsed, optimized, stripped of excess motion. The next round is chambered before the gunner has fully reacquired the horizon. This tempo is the true weapon. Opposing crews are still searching, still trying to orient, still scanning darkness for flashes that no longer matter. Their doctrine tells them to listen, to wait, to react. Reaction is no longer fast enough. Another heat signature emerges, partially obscured, attempting concealment behind terrain. The system sees through intent. Warm steel remains warm steel. Range, solution, fire. The interval between kills compresses until it feels mechanical, not frantic, not emotional, merely efficient. From the opposing perspective, the experience is incomprehensible. Vehicles are lost without warning. Leaders cannot issue orders fast enough to matter. Communication collapses under confusion rather than fear. Crews fire blindly, not out of courage, but instinct. The battlefield returns nothing. By the time they understand they are under attack, they are already reduced to secondary explosions lighting the night. What unfolds is not a clash of formations. It is not maneuver versus maneuver. It is process versus presence. Those with the ability to perceive first control time. Those without perception surrender it unknowingly. Every second stolen is lethal. Later, analysts will describe the engagement using familiar terms: breakthrough, overmatch, decisive action. Those words miss the point. What happened was simpler and more disturbing. One side fought an enemy. The other side fought a system. And systems do not panic, do not hesitate, do not get tired. They only continue, until nothing warm remains to be seen. Those Iraqi commanders who survived did not describe defeat. They described disappearance. Battles where units ceased responding without ever reporting contact. Companies erased before orders could be issued. Columns that vanished between radio checks. Men who did everything doctrine demanded and died anyway. Their reports were dismissed at first. Shock, fatigue, collapse of morale. Then the data arrived. Maps layered with kill locations, timelines compressed into impossible intervals, gun camera footage showing nothing, and then annihilation. Thermal signatures blooming and vanishing like dying stars. This was not chaos, it was consistency. What the Iraqi army encountered was not superior bravery, nor better tactics in the traditional sense. It was the loss of a shared battlefield. For centuries, warfare depended on mutual perception. Even unequal wars assumed that both sides occupied the same sensory universe. One side might shoot farther, maneuver faster, command better, but both still saw the same night, the same fog, the same terrain. That assumption died in the desert. Thermal warfare does not reward mass. It punishes it. Every additional vehicle becomes another heat source, another coordinate, another priority target. Concentration no longer creates shock, it creates clarity. The great armored charge, centerpiece of 20th century doctrine, becomes a line of glowing signatures advancing obediently into calculated fire. Not overwhelmed. Enumerated. Military academies would later struggle to articulate this shift. They revised manuals, adjusted diagrams, added chapters on sensors and information dominance. But the deeper lesson was uncomfortable. The decisive factor was no longer armor thickness or gun caliber. It was perception control. The side that controlled perception controlled time. The side that controlled time controlled violence. The Iraqis fought inside darkness. The Americans fought inside daylight that only they could see. By the end of the campaign, entire formations ceased to exist. Not encircled, not routed, simply removed. Divisions that took decades to build were erased in hours. Their equipment did not fail. Their soldiers did not flee en masse. They were rendered irrelevant by physics. Historians would later argue about ethics, proportionality, and restraint. Those debates matter, but they do not change what happened on the battlefield. A threshold was crossed. After 1991, no serious army could pretend night was neutral. No doctrine could assume visibility symmetry. No planner could rely on mass without asking who would be seen first. The old rules did not bend. They vanished. What replaced them was not a new tactic, but a new condition of war. One where being unseen is no longer protection, and courage without perception is indistinguishable from helplessness. The desert did not witness a battle. It witnessed a transition. From wars fought by those who could endure the darkness to wars won by those who could see through it. And once that door opened, it never closed again.